War II was a clash of nations and of ideologies. Citizens of the United States knew we were fighting Germany, Japan, and Italy, fascism and militarism, for the sake of freedom, democracy, and the American way, and to free other countries from the yoke of oppression. However, the enemy was also individualized to a significant extent. In addition to generic stereotypes of Nazis, Italians, and the Japanese, the enemy was also represented by their leaders: Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Emperor Hirohito, and Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. In return, the Axis mocked and vilified President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek of China. This was not a totally new phenomenon. During the First World War, British and American propaganda utilized the image of Kaiser Wilhelm II as the propaganda symbol of Germany. But World War II propaganda was even more personal. Both Hitler and Mussolini had been internationally known public figures for a number of years prior to the outbreak of hostilities. The situation with Japan was less clear. Both Hirohito and Tojo were subject to name-calling, but in many cases a sort of generic, composite Japanese leader caricature was teamed up with Hitler and Mussolini to form an Axis triumvirate in Allied propaganda.
Adolf, you've bitten off much more than you can chew. Come on, hold your hand out, we're all fed up with you.
The most prevalent enemy figure in Allied propaganda, including comic book covers, was Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. Hitler appeared on the covers of more than a dozen comics published before the United States entered the war in December 1941, and on more than 50 wartime comic book covers overall, and in literally of hundreds of interior stories. This pattern was repeated in films, on propaganda posters, in magazines, and other media. By far the most prevalent use of Adolf Hitler's image in wartime propaganda was as the butt of rude humor. Although portraying the leader of Nazi Germany as a weak, cowardly, neurotic, inept, unstable megalomaniac was somewhat at odds with the actual military accomplishments of Hitler's armed forces, and furthermore seemed to suggest that he would be rather easily defeated, the propaganda benefit of ridiculing Hitler was apparently deemed worth the risk. Many wartime comic book covers showed a comical Hitler being thrashed, punched, or otherwise personally punished for his misbehavior. Boy Commandos No. 2 shows Hitler being given the bum's rush by the unruly teenage heroes. This cover works on several levels. First, it ridicules Hitler, calling him a bum and having him manhandled by 4 teenagers as their adult mentor stands by and watches. Furthermore, the comic conveys the message that even children can contribute to the war effort by buying war bonds and stamps, and thus they can indirectly participate in the defeat of the Axis and the ejection of Adolf Hitler. The Columbia Comics line was home to characters like Joe Palooka and Sparky Watts, who repeatedly got the best of the inept Nazi dictator, as seen on the covers of Big Shot No. 25, where Hitler is portrayed as a befuddled U-boat commander, Big Shot No. 43, which pokes fun at the story of Hitler's artistic past, suggesting he was a house painter rather than an actual artist, and Sparky Watts No. 1, where Sparky is strangling a red-faced Hitler and stomping on Hermann Goering. Other publishers followed suit. On the cover of Super Duck No. 1, the dopey duck puts the squeeze on Hitler and a Japanese caricature, while on the cover of Jolly Jingles No. 12, Super Duck plays Bugs Bunny to Hitler's Elmer Fudd. On the cover of Terry Toons Comics No. 7, animated cartoon stars Gandy Goose and Sourpuss Cat prepare to feed Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito to some sharks. Super Rabbit, on the cover of Super Rabbit Comics No. 1, delivers Hitler and Hirohito to the war guilt trials, anticipating the real-life post-war war crimes tribunals at Nuremberg and elsewhere. Comedy Comics No. 20 depicts some sort of Hitler dog threatening 2 cute pigs. while Comedy Comics number 22 utilizes the Hitler is a pig imagery frequently used in other propaganda media as well. These funny animal comic books were aimed at younger readers who were not spared a dose of propaganda, although it was toned down considerably from the images of Hitler and other Axis leaders depicted in comics and other media aimed at adolescent, teen, and adult audiences. Exposing children to propaganda at a young age could serve a dual purpose: to diffuse their fears by showing the enemy as silly and ineffectual, and to help children become emotionally invested in the war effort, which might lead to more active participation in the future. In contrast to the previously seen images of Hitler the Fool, wartime propaganda at times attempted to show Hitler as a true menace to the Allies and, by extension, to civilization. Hitler began appearing on comic book covers well before the United States entered the war. Captain America Comics number 1 was dated March 1941 and sold on newsstands several months prior to that. It features Captain America slugging the Nazi leader. A television screen in the background shows Nazi saboteurs blowing up a U.S. munitions works building, and Hitler has carelessly dropped a map of the United States and his sabotage plans for the USA on the floor. This cover was drawn by the team of Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Apparently Hitler didn't learn his lesson, because Captain America had to crash Nazi headquarters once again on the cover of Captain America number 2 in order to save his sidekick Bucky from Hitler. Ironically, once the war began, Hitler appeared on only one other Captain America cover, and then not until March 1944. However, his image was definitely not absent from the covers of other titles. For example, Jack Kirby drew Hitler and the Red Skull battling Bucky, Toro, and the Young Allies on the cover of Young Allies Comics number 1, summer 1941. Alex Schomburg's cover for Marvel Mystery Comics number 46, dated August 1943, depicts a monstrous hydrocephalic green-faced Hitler and his zombie henchmen torturing the Human Torch's sidekick Toro and a terrified redhead. Another green-faced Hitler appears on the cover of Silver Streak Comics number 16, November 1941, drawn by artist Don Rico. Hitler himself looks relatively normal, but he commands a trunk full of miniature demons on the cover of Mystic Comics number 7, December 1941, another Jack Kirby drawing. A similar horde of green creatures accompanies a heavily armed Hitler on his personal subterranean attack on the White House on the cover of Speed Comics number 16, drawn by Al Avison. These two covers link Hitler with inhuman monsters and the supernatural, a frequent propaganda ploy. Hitler personally leads an invasion of the United States, piloting a super drill that penetrates the New York Tunnel on the cover of USA Comics number 2, November 1941. The Nazi dictator is also very hands-on on the cover of Weird Comics number 20, dated January 1942. Hitler himself has traveled to London to abduct Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who sits disgruntled in a rowboat as superheroes the Eagle and Buddy attempt to rescue him. While the cover caption refers to the captive as Vernoff, it's clearly meant to be Winston Churchill. Weird Comics was published by Fox, which also portrayed very active Hitlers on the covers of Mystery Men Comics number 27, and Fantastic Comics number 21 and number 22, all published in 1941, well before America officially declared war on Germany. As a minor concession to neutrality, Hitler is referred to only as the dictator, although there is no attempt to disguise the swastikas or other Nazi-identifying marks. Headline Comics number 8, summer 1944, contains one of the more dramatic, serious Hitler covers, with the Nazi dictator portrayed as a sinister genie freed from a lamp by the unwitting Junior Rangers. Another giant Hitler had been featured on the cover of Daredevil Comics #1, also known as Daredevil Battles Hitler, dated July 1941. Artist Charles Biro used an actual photo of Hitler's head to depict the mad merchant of hate being beset by Daredevil, Silver Streak, Dickie Dean, and Lance Hale, heroes of the Lev Gleason comic book line. Real Life Comics #3, also distributed as Real Life Picture Magazine, featured an allegorical Alex Schomburg portrait of Hitler as the Emperor of Hate. This was published early in 1942, and in keeping with the nonfiction nature of the comic book, has no humorous aspects. The artwork not only displays a stern-looking pistol and skull-toting Hitler looming over a war-torn globe, it also includes cities in flames, panzer tanks and Stukas engaged in blitzkrieg, pitiful refugees under the watchful eye of Nazi soldiers, and, surprisingly, a depiction of a concentration camp. Of course, in early 1942, Nazi concentration camps were not yet synonymous in the public mind with extermination camps, which were just being established at that time, but they were still associated with Nazi brutality. A number of comic book covers didn't utilize Hitler as a character on the cover, but still managed to include him, citing his name rudely or inserting a portrait of the German leader in the artwork. These pictures of Hitler often receive the same rough treatment as Der Fuhrer himself on other comic book covers.
Adolf, you've bitten off much more than you can chew. Come on.